welcome to the Subtle Beast Podcast After Show. I'm Brian Webb, and I can't wait to introduce Steve and Foltz back to talk about one of their top 5. I think they're going to tell us this in their top 5. Definitely one of my favorite episodes, Parallel Universes. So let's get right into this after show.
Hang on.
So as I mentioned, we're back with Steve and Foltz talking about Parallel Universes.
Excited.
Guys, where does Parallel Universes fall in your all-time favorite episodes?
For me, it's definitely in my top 5, of course.
Yeah. I mean, as far as Parallel Universes goes, looking back through the catalog, it's the one show that I wanted to go to first. After we did our intros, after our second episode was going over The Other Side, which is that week's show, going back through the catalog, this is the one I wanted to hit.
Now, this show is 3 years old. It was
Yes.
episode number 19, right? Okay.
Man.
So you guys had to pull this out of the memory bank, so it's
Yeah.
impressive to hear this in the top 5.
But it stays within our within our thought because it ties into so many other topics that we discuss on the show.
Yeah, it intertwines, right?
Yeah, so it's always right there, kind of.
Okay, so question for you, starting out with you, Foltz.
Okay.
Would you have gone into that Peruvian forest?
I totally would have gone into it if someone would give me the money right now.
Really?
Yeah.
You'd have, run, or you would have walked tepidly?
Well, first of all, I'm gonna need a guide going through the Peruvian jungle. So, but yeah, I mean, if it was all expense paid, and we're gonna take you to that spot where that creepy house is, I totally would go.
You're all in.
Now, granted, I'd be going alone.
There's
'cause
no way.
I know Steve's
There's
not
no
going.
way I would go into the Peruvian forest to that creepy house for that story. Absolutely not. No way.
I've seen him in Camden.
That's quite different answers there. Okay, so Foltz, did any stories not make the cut?
There was one story that it's a good story. It didn't make the cut because it was pretty lengthy, but I'll try and tell it now best I can, just off of memory. There was a couple that they were just I believe it was in somewhere in the Midwest, but they were driving through maybe like the Black Hills in the Dakotas, and they came across a little bed and breakfast. So they stopped and they stayed there. What was amazing to them was everything was like old time. Even the next morning afterwards, their breakfast, they couldn't believe the price of it. It was like minuscule. So they wanted to remember this place. So they had taken some pictures. When they got them developed, those pictures didn't turn out. So they decided to make a trip back to this place, and it was just an old dilapidated building that hadn't been opened in 20, 30 years, but it was, opened originally back in like the 40s, and that was the time period that they were experiencing while they were traveling through this town on their way to a vacation.
Ugh.
So they surmised this was a parallel universe travel?
Yeah, a parallel universe, or what's called sometimes a time slip.
I was just thinking time slip.
So, yeah, but I mean, they intertwine as well, so either one. I mean, a time slip could be a parallel universe. You could have stepped into a parallel universe that in that universe, that was the time period. So...
Well, that kind of came up in the show with the dimensions. When we were talking about the dimensions and the planes laid out and how you could travel forward and backward, and we kind of go into not wanting to know the forward,
Exactly.
not wanting to know the future, but being able to transfer between the planes and the future and the past. So that's a definitely a time slip or an interdimensional or a multi-universe or parallel universe travel. That's cool.
Well, you guys were talking, too, about how you remember this was taught to you in about 3rd grade. I was talking to my daughters. One's in 5th, one's in 3rd grade. Okay. We don't think this is being taught today. I am curious to know if any viewers out there, if they know if their kids are being taught about parallel universes. Say that 3 times fast.
I don't think that when Foltz was telling that story and he said that his teacher had said that, he wasn't saying that he was being taught that as part of the curriculum. I think that what you were saying was it part of the curriculum?
It wasn't part of the curriculum.
Oh, she brought it up.
You're right.
This particular teacher.
Right, which is great.
Oh,
for
misunderstanding on my part then.
You know what? For a teacher to mention that, and that probably be the only thing that I take away from third grade.
Right. That's
the
the thing
fact
that stuck with them.
That my teacher said, imagine there's another Earth out there with another you doing the exact same thing that you're doing right now, and we're having the exact same conversation. To me, that was, I mean, even back then, I was like, that's everything.
It's a mind blowing concept. It still is. I
Which
love it.
started the small but slow road to subtle beast.
I still say if you know of your kids learning about this through school, put that in the comments or get a hold of us.
Yeah,
That'd be
If it-
fascinating.
I mean, because that'll be kudos to that school for sure.
So, False, I got a question for you. Do you know if dreams play a part in this topic, or do they give us a glimpse at all of us slipping in and out of different dimensions?
Well, sure. I mean, I believe that because a dream, I mean, sometimes people will say that I had a dream that was so real, that I had this experience that was so real. Well, that could have been an actual experience, your consciousness or whatever you believe, leaving your body and going, having that experience, maybe not in this realm, but in a higher dimension. And,
or a connection to yourself as a being in a parallel universe, and that being a memory of something that you've done, but not in this universe.
exactly. Very good.
Well, that's good stuff, guys. I was wondering about that. I think a lot of people that I've talked to about this
Sure.
recently,
Sure.
want to know, do my dreams tell me about this? So,
I believe that they are. I mean, not all, but when we were doing the episode of The Other Side, we might have touched on it briefly, but people that have realistic dreams after someone has passed away, those aren't necessarily dreams. They're referred to as a visitation because they seem so real. And I mean, I had one personally, but that's for another time.
all right, so we're going to get really down into the weeds on this question. I'm curious what you guys believe is a greater leap of faith.
Okay.
God, believing in God, or believing in the multiverse.
Okay. For me personally, I would say that maybe it would be a bigger leap to believe in God. But at the same time that I say that, my reasoning behind it is because if you believe in a multiverse, well then if your God is all knowing, now this is no offense to anybody, but if your God is all knowing, all doing, and can do anything, omnipresent, then certainly if there is another parallel universe or multiverse that mimics where you come from, then certainly he would be able to, within the snap of his fingers, be able to create that same type of life there in that parallel universe or that existence.
I agree. I think that most religions, that's a very sound answer. I think that's very logical.
Or, thank you.
Yeah.
Good stuff. All right, so Steve,
Yeah.
what is your least favorite dimension that was talked about in the episode?
But the dimensions part of it was cool, and Foles kind of sprinkled them through the episode two at a time. And as the episode builds, we start off with dimensions that are in this universe and in this reality. So the first dimension, the second dimension, the third dimension. We're with that the whole way.
Yeah.
Then we kind of bridge to the fourth dimension, and we make jokes about 4K TV and how we don't know where it's going. But then things start to take a turn, and then we start to bring up the fifth dimension. And I'm hanging with it. We get fifth and sixth, then seventh and eighth, and by the time we get to the ninth and 10th, it's so far out there. It's kind of like this is the dimension that holds nothing close to the dimensions that you have ever experienced. And then the 10th is just utter and complete chaos. And while we were talking about it, I just couldn't get it. I just couldn't wrap my head around it. So I would have to say that my least favorite dimension that we discussed, it would have been the 10th, because it's just too much for my brain to comprehend.
But then we brought him back up, the dimensions in The Other Side, when we were talking about the Mossad.
Yeah.
And what happens after that. So if you didn't hear that, go check that out, because it's really interesting, and it's a really closer glimpse of what I firmly believe as far as creation, and we'll just leave it at that.
So 3 years later, you guys are driving around, running errands, whatever the case is. Do you still think about these stories and think about what could be next for you just driving down the road?
Well, of course, these stories pretty much consume me throughout any given day.
Right, the stories that we shared on parallel universes, but then just the theory of parallel universes. Like, you think of a decision that you're making, and it may be small, maybe big, but then that branches off, and now all of a sudden, in some parallel universe, that version of Steve or that version of Foltz is now on a different path, and you have to think back to all of those decisions that you've made and how many different paths there could be, where you're at right now, where you're going, and those decisions that you're making mean something to you in this reality, in this dimension. So yeah, I think about it quite
And on
often.
top of that, those parallel universes are within theory of what is creating what the Mandela effect.
Absolutely.
I mean, the whole story with CERN by a young physicist, and by when I say young, I mean 14, 15 years old, had stated that one of the theories is that when CERN was creating black holes back in 2012, that one of two things were going to happen. Either it was going to create and nothing was going to happen, or it was going to destroy the universe. Well, his theory is that that happened, and at that exact time that destroyed our universe, we got shifted into another parallel universe, and close to ours, but we're starting to notice differences from the reality that we're familiar with. Theory.
Well, guys, to wrap up, we also want to find out from you, what is your belief level on a scale of 1 to 10 of a multiverse? I'd like you each to answer. I mean, do you just believe that it's out there, or are you still not sure based on some of your research?
Yeah, I mean, as far as my belief goes, and I want to ask folks to talk about this theory that we came up with. But as far as my belief goes on it, I'm 100% there. I there's definitely.
So 1 to 10, you're a 10.
I'm a 10. I'm a 10 for sure.
I'm a 10 as well. Some of the things, we'll talk about them on future after shows. Some of the things that I've experienced and just throughout my life, there's more than just this realm right here, or this dimension, if you will.
So one of the things that we've figured out, and it's kind of figured out, but like one of the things that we've researched and came across after we recorded this show, because we discussed this is a show that we did 3 years ago, and it still holds true, but we've kind of done more research and talked to a little bit about the atom bomb, the Hiroshima,
Right.
Nagasaki.
Right, and I believe we have mentioned this, the story that I'm going to tell right now on a past podcast, but it's interesting because if you buy into the multi-dimensional theory, just like me and Steve did, we're 10s on that. So let's go back to World War II when we dropped the atom bomb. Well, if there's a multiverse, or there's another ultimate reality right on top of us with that, because that's what that would be, it's quite possible that destruction of that bomb did more harm in another reality, or another multiverse, or another parallel universe than it did here, which then triggered what came next after that real quickly, 1947, Roswell, because there was probably some extraterrestrials. Maybe they weren't from another star system. Maybe they were from another dimension. Maybe they're multi-dimensional beings coming here and saying, what are these humans doing? Oh, they figured out how to split the atom. We need to get involved now because they can't destroy us or Earth because it doesn't belong to them.
Right. It was a powerful theory at the time, and the scientists that were developing the bomb at the time didn't know necessarily that it was going to stop the 2 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 16, 16 to 32, just keep multiplying out. They weren't really sure that it wasn't going to fully encompass the Earth. So when Foltz tells that story, and what he's saying is that it was such a powerful blast that we created as humans, something so powerful that not only was it felt here, that it was felt into the next parallel universe over. And that parallel universe housed some beings that were so interested in the fact that we've created this now that they were able.
Concerned.
Yeah, I mean, just somehow struck by it that they were able, and we might not even be able to fathom this thought, to jump into where our reality, come and kind of investigate what we're doing with this technology. Are we using this technology to destroy each other? Are we using this technology to destroy the planet? Are we using this technology to enhance or create energy? What are we doing? And I think that when
Would have been all but the last one.
right when Fultz is saying that's when Roswell, there was a ton of spotting saucers. There was a craze that went around the world at that time, and I think that is.
Oh, the government admitted it and then retracted it the next day. I mean, there was
I think that's a powerful theory. So I like that.
That's great.
Thank you.
So, guys, that is a wrap on another Subtle Beast after show, breaking
Fantastic.
down parallel universes.
Thank you, Brian.
Great.
Absolutely. We'll
Thank
see
you,
you
bud.
guys soon.
All right.
Stay subtle.
Stay beast.